You didn't just wake up one day and feel disconnected. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a moment where something snapped and suddenly you were no longer inside your own life. It was quieter than that. It happened in small adjustments, small compromises, small moments where you chose what was necessary over what was true. At first you didn't notice, because nothing dramatic was lost. You could still function. You could still speak normally. You could still smile at the right times. From the outside, nothing was wrong. But internally, something had shifted. Not broken, shifted. You stopped checking in with yourself before making decisions. You started choosing based on what made sense, not what felt aligned. You learned to override discomfort quickly. You learned to silence signals that slowed you down. And over time, that override became automatic. You became efficient at moving forward, without bringing yourself with you. It didn't feel like disconnection. It felt like maturity, like discipline, like growing up. You told yourself this was what stability looked like. This was what functioning adults did. They didn't hesitate. They didn't question every step. They adapted. So you adapted. You adapted to the pace. You adapted to the expectations. You adapted to the constant background noise of modern life. And with each adaptation, something subtle happened. Not visible, not measurable, but real. You became slightly less present inside your own experience. Not enough to alarm you, just enough to create distance. Distance between what you were doing and what you were feeling. Distance between who you were and who you were becoming. You didn't call it disconnection. You called it responsibility. You called it focus. You called it survival. But survival has a cost. Because the version of you that learned to function this way also learned how to disappear quietly. Not completely, just enough to keep everything running. And the strangest part is, you didn't lose yourself all at once. You slowly learned how to live without needing to feel yourself there. At first, it even felt like progress. You became more reliable, more consistent, less emotional, less distracted. You didn't react the way you used to. Things that once excited you barely moved you. Things that once hurt you became easier to ignore. You told yourself this was strength. You told yourself you were becoming stable. But stability isn't supposed to feel empty. And you began to notice something strange, not in dramatic moments, in ordinary ones. You'd be sitting with people you care about and feel slightly elsewhere, not physically, internally. They were talking. You were responding, but something inside you wasn't fully present, like there was a delay between you and your own experience. You started going through the motions of your life without fully arriving inside it. You still laughed, but it felt automatic. You still rested, but it didn't restore you. You still achieved things, but the satisfaction faded quickly. Not because the achievements didn't matter, but because you weren't fully there to receive them. And this is where confusion begins. Because nothing is obviously wrong. Your life looks functional, maybe even successful. But internally, it feels distant, muted, flat. You wonder if this is just adulthood, if this is what maturity feels like. You wonder if everyone else is experiencing the same quiet disconnection and just not talking about it. So you don't question it too deeply. You assume it's normal. You assume this is what it means to adapt. But adaptation doesn't always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like losing access to parts of yourself you didn't realize you needed to keep. The disconnection didn't begin as a decision. It began as a requirement. Not one that anyone announced, not one that anyone explained, but one you felt. Felt in the subtle ways the world responded to you. You learned early that certain versions of you were easier for the world to accept. The version that performed well. The version that stayed composed. The version that didn't slow things down with too many questions or too much emotion. That version of you was rewarded. Not always with praise. Sometimes just with relief. Relief in other people's faces. Relief in their tone. Relief in the absence of tension. And your nervous system noticed. It noticed which version of you kept things smooth. Which version of you avoided friction. Which version of you kept you safe. So you practiced becoming that version. At first it felt like effort. You had to remind yourself to stay focused, to stay calm, to stay productive. But over time, effort became habit, and habit became identity. You stopped asking yourself how you felt. You started asking yourself what was required, what made sense, what needed to be done. This is how performance conditioning works. It doesn't force you to disconnect. It teaches you that connection is inefficient. Connection slows you down. Connection complicates decisions. Connection introduces uncertainty. But performance rewards certainty. Performance rewards speed. Performance rewards consistency. So you optimized for performance. You optimized your reactions. You optimized your time. You optimized your emotions. Not by eliminating them completely, but by reducing their influence. You learned to delay feelings, to postpone reflection, to keep moving, because movement felt like progress, and progress felt like safety. The more you moved, the less you had to sit with yourself, the less you had to notice the growing distance inside. Modern life reinforced this conditioning. Everywhere you looked, performance was visible. Metrics, achievements, milestones, output. You were constantly exposed to signals that told you what mattered. And what mattered was measurable. Presence isn't measurable. Connection isn't measurable. Inner alignment isn't measurable. But productivity is. So productivity became the language you learned to speak, even with yourself. You began evaluating your days based on output. Was today useful? Was today efficient? Was today productive? You rarely asked, was I present? Was I connected? Did I feel like myself? Because those questions didn't help you move forward. They slowed you down, and slowing down began to feel dangerous. Not physically dangerous, psychologically dangerous. Because slowing down meant noticing tension, noticing fatigue, noticing dissatisfaction you couldn't immediately solve. So you stayed in motion, you stayed engaged, you stayed occupied, not because you loved the pace, but because the pace protected you from what silence might reveal. This is the paradox. Disconnection didn't feel like loss. It felt like functionality. You became someone others could rely on, someone who didn't fall apart easily, someone who could carry responsibility, someone who could endure. And endurance became part of your identity. You took pride in it. You told yourself this was strength, and in many ways it was. But endurance without reconnection slowly creates distance. Distance between action and experience. Distance between effort and meaning. Distance between who you are and who you are performing as. At some point, you stopped noticing the difference because the performance was consistent. It worked. It allowed you to build a life. It allowed you to maintain stability. It allowed you to function in environments that required reliability. But functionality and connection are not the same thing. You can function perfectly while feeling completely absent inside. You can succeed externally while feeling internally misaligned. And because performance brought results, you trusted it. You trusted the system. You trusted the conditioning. You trusted the identity you had built around being capable. But capability can hide disconnection. In fact, capability often makes disconnection harder to detect because nothing collapses. Nothing breaks dramatically. Everything keeps working. You keep working. You keep producing. You keep moving forward. And forward movement gives the illusion that nothing is missing until you stop. Until there's a moment of stillness. A moment without distraction. A moment where there is nothing to do. And in that moment, you notice the silence inside doesn't feel peaceful. It feels unfamiliar. Not painful. Not overwhelming. Just unfamiliar. Like you're standing slightly outside your own life. Watching it happen. Participating in it. But not fully inside it. And the strangest part is, you don't know exactly when it began. Because it didn't begin with loss. It began with adaptation. Adaptation to expectations. Adaptation to pressure. Adaptation to a world that rewards performance more than presence. You didn't choose disconnection. You learned it. You practiced it. You became efficient at it. And eventually, you became someone who could live an entire day, without fully feeling yourself inside it. Not because you were broken, but because you became very good at being who the world needed you to be, even if it meant slowly losing contact with who you were. There's something even deeper happening beneath performance. Something quieter. Something your mind didn't consciously choose. Your nervous system was adapting because your nervous system has one primary responsibility, not happiness, not fulfillment, survival. And survival doesn't always mean keeping you alive physically. It means keeping you functional, keeping you stable, keeping you capable of continuing in the environment you're in, even if that environment slowly disconnects you from yourself. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for threats, scanning for pressure, scanning for instability, not just obvious danger, subtle danger, social danger, emotional danger, psychological danger, the danger of falling behind, the danger of disappointing others, the danger of losing your place, the danger of not being enough. Modern life exposes you to a constant stream of these signals, not directly, indirectly, through comparison, through expectations, through silent standards you internalize without realizing it. Every time you see someone doing more, achieving more, becoming more, your nervous system registers it, not as inspiration, as pressure. Pressure to keep up, pressure to maintain your position, pressure to not fall behind. And pressure, when sustained long enough, changes how your nervous system operates. It increases baseline alertness. It increases internal tension. It reduces tolerance for uncertainty. Your system shifts into efficiency mode. Efficiency mode prioritizes output over experience. Efficiency mode prioritizes functioning over feeling, because feeling requires slowing down. Feeling requires openness. Feeling requires safety. And safety becomes harder to access when your nervous system perceives constant demand. So your system makes a trade. It reduces emotional sensitivity. Not completely, just enough. Enough to keep you moving. Enough to keep you functioning. Enough to prevent overload. This isn't something you consciously decided. It's something your body learned. Your nervous system realized full emotional engagement is expensive. It consumes energy. It introduces vulnerability. It slows decision-making. So it adjusted. It muted certain signals. It dampened certain responses. It created distance. Distance between stimulus and feeling. Distance between experience and emotional impact. This distance allowed you to handle more, to endure more, to tolerate environments that required consistency, environments that didn't pause for your internal state, environments that rewarded stability, not sensitivity. Over time, this adaptation became your baseline. You stopped noticing the reduction because it happened gradually. You didn't wake up numb. You slowly became less responsive, less reactive, less emotionally available to yourself. Not in a dramatic way, in a functional way. You could still feel things, but the intensity was lower. The connection was thinner. The immediacy was gone. It felt like there was a layer between you and your own experience, a filter, a delay, a subtle barrier. This is what nervous system efficiency looks like. It protects you from overload, but it also protects you from aliveness. Because aliveness requires openness, and openness requires safety. If your system doesn't feel safe slowing down, it won't. It will keep you moving. It will keep you occupied. It will keep you focused on external demands. Because external focus prevents internal awareness. Internal awareness might reveal exhaustion, might reveal dissatisfaction, might reveal emotional backlog, things your system has been postponing. So it postpones them further, not maliciously, protectively. Your nervous system doesn't care if you feel deeply connected. It cares if you remain operational. And you remained operational. You showed up. You fulfilled responsibilities. You maintained your life. From the outside, nothing appeared wrong. But internally, something essential was reduced. Not broken, reduced. You became someone who could handle almost anything. But handling is not the same as feeling. Handling is mechanical. Feeling is alive. Mechanical functioning can continue indefinitely. Aliveness cannot be forced. Aliveness emerges when your system feels safe enough to open again. But if safety never fully arrives, openness stays limited. So disconnection becomes normal. Not because it's ideal, because it's efficient, because it works, because it allows you to exist within the demands placed on you, even if it means existing at a distance from yourself. This is why disconnection feels confusing. Because nothing catastrophic happened. There was no singular trauma, no singular event you can point to. Just accumulation. Accumulation of pressure. Accumulation of expectation. Accumulation of adaptation. Each one small. Each one logical. Each one necessary at the time, until necessity became identity. And identity became distance. Distance from your own internal signals. Distance from your own emotional landscape. Distance from your own presence. And because your nervous system learned this pattern well, it continues it automatically, without asking, without explaining, because that's what it was designed to do. Protect you, even if protection comes at the cost of connection. Even if protection creates a life where you can function perfectly, but rarely feel fully inside yourself. And the most important thing to understand is this: your nervous system didn't disconnect you to hurt you. It disconnected you to help you survive the version of life you were living. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It adapted. It optimized. It protected. Even if that protection slowly created a version of you who learned how to keep going without fully being there. At some point, disconnection stopped feeling like something that happened to you. It started feeling like who you are, not because you chose it, because you practiced it. You practiced not reacting. You practiced not pausing. You practiced moving forward regardless of what was happening inside. And the more you practiced, the more natural it became. Until one day you couldn't remember what it felt like to be fully inside your own life. You could remember moments, fragments, versions of yourself that felt more alive, more present, more open. But those versions felt distant now. Not gone, just inaccessible. Like they belonged to a different environment, a different pace, a different nervous system. You didn't suddenly become disconnected. You became functional. And functionality was rewarded. People trusted you, relied on you, respected your consistency. They saw stability. They saw reliability. They saw strength. They didn't see the quiet distance inside you. Because distance doesn't interrupt performance. Distance allows performance. Distance allows you to keep moving, even when something inside you needs attention. Distance allows you to meet expectations, even when you feel nothing while doing it. Distance allows you to survive environments that don't slow down for your humanity. And survival becomes convincing. Convincing enough that you stop questioning it. You stop wondering whether something is missing. Because everything appears to be working, until there's a moment, usually a quiet one, where nothing is demanding anything from you. No deadlines, no expectations, no distractions, just you. And in that moment, you realize you don't feel relief. You feel unfamiliar. You don't feel at home inside yourself. You feel like a visitor. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They think something is wrong. They think they broke themselves. They think they lost something permanently. But the truth is far more unsettling. You didn't lose yourself. You learned how to operate without constant access to yourself. You learned how to reduce internal noise so you could handle external noise. You learned how to prioritize stability over connection. You learned how to maintain output even when presence disappeared. And the world rewarded you for it. Because the world doesn't reward connection. It rewards consistency. It rewards reliability. It rewards performance. So you became someone who could perform, even at the cost of feeling fully present while doing it. This is the cognitive rupture most people never fully articulate. You didn't disconnect because you were weak. You disconnected because it was the most intelligent adaptation available to you. Your nervous system chose function over feeling, continuity over depth, survival over presence. Not because presence didn't matter, because survival mattered first. And when survival becomes the priority long enough, disconnection stops feeling like protection. It starts feeling like identity. You begin to believe this distance is who you are, not realizing it was something you learned, something you adapted, something your nervous system created to help you keep going in a life that never asked if you were still fully there. The most difficult part isn't the moment you disconnect. It's the moment you realize how long you've been living this way. Because disconnection doesn't stop your life. It continues your life. You still wake up. You still move through your routines. You still fulfill expectations. From the outside, nothing collapses. But internally, something subtle changes in how you experience everything. Moments don't land the same way. Conversations don't penetrate as deeply. Achievements don't satisfy as fully. Rest doesn't restore you completely. Not because those moments lack value, because your access to them is limited. You're there, but partially. Like you're standing behind glass, watching yourself live, participating, but not immersed. And this partial presence becomes your normal. You stop expecting depth. You stop expecting intensity. You stop expecting to feel fully connected, not consciously. Gradually, your standards adjust. You begin to measure your life by stability, not aliveness. You begin to prioritize maintaining over experiencing, maintaining your responsibilities, maintaining your relationships, maintaining your image, maintaining your pace. Maintenance becomes your identity because maintenance feels safe. Maintenance feels predictable. Maintenance doesn't require emotional risk. But maintenance also doesn't create meaning. Meaning requires engagement. Meaning requires vulnerability. Meaning requires presence. And presence is exactly what disconnection reduces. So you continue. Efficient, reliable, capable, and quietly distant. This distance affects everything. Not dramatically, subtly. You notice it when something good happens, and your reaction feels delayed. You notice it when something painful happens, and your reaction feels muted. You notice it when you try to reflect, and everything feels slightly out of reach. Not gone, just out of reach. You start wondering when this became normal. You start wondering if it was always like this. You start wondering if this is just what adulthood feels like. You tell yourself maybe this is maturity. Maybe this is emotional stability. Maybe this is growth. But growth doesn't feel like absence. Growth feels like expansion. Disconnection feels like reduction. Reduction of intensity. reduction of clarity, reduction of internal contact. And because it happened gradually, you adapted to the reduction. You built your life around it. You built routines that didn't require full presence. You built habits that supported functionality. You built an identity around being someone who could handle things, someone who didn't fall apart easily, someone who didn't need much. But this version of you wasn't created in comfort. It was created in adaptation. Adaptation to pressure, adaptation to pace, adaptation to environments that required consistency over authenticity. And adaptation is effective. It allows survival. It allows progress. It allows stability. But adaptation also reshapes you. It reshapes how you experience yourself, how you experience others, how you experience your own life. And when adaptation lasts long enough, you forget what existed before it. You forget what it felt like to be fully present without effort. You forget what it felt like to exist without managing yourself constantly. You forget what it felt like to feel naturally connected. Because disconnection doesn't announce itself. It integrates. It blends into your personality. It becomes part of how you operate. And because you continue functioning, you assume everything is fine. You assume nothing is missing. Until moments of silence expose the distance. Moments when there's nothing to do, nothing to achieve, nothing to maintain, just you. And in those moments, the absence becomes visible. Not painful, not overwhelming, just empty. Not the kind of empty that hurts. The kind of empty that confuses. Because you can't explain it. You can't point to what's wrong. Your life works, but you don't feel fully inside it. This is the quiet consequence of adaptation. You became someone who could survive anything. But in the process, you also became someone who learned how to exist at a distance from yourself. Not because you failed, because your nervous system succeeded. It protected you. It stabilized you. It allowed you to continue, even if continuing meant learning how to live, without fully feeling present while doing it. And the longer this continues, the more disconnection stops feeling like a response and starts feeling like who you've always been. The hardest truth isn't that you became disconnected. It's that you became disconnected for a reason, not a dramatic reason, not a single moment you can point to, but a pattern of adapting to a world that never slowed down long enough to ask how you felt inside it. You didn't wake up and abandon yourself. You slowly learned how to set yourself aside. You set yourself aside when expectations were louder than your instincts. You set yourself aside when functioning mattered more than feeling. You set yourself aside when survival required consistency. And each time you did, it worked. It helped you move forward. It helped you maintain your place. It helped you keep going. So you trusted it. You trusted the version of you that could endure, the version of you that didn't hesitate, the version of you that didn't need to stop and ask difficult internal questions. Because asking those questions would have slowed everything down. And slowing down didn't feel safe. So you became someone who could live without asking, live without checking, live without noticing how far you had drifted from yourself. Not completely, just enough. Enough to remain functional, enough to remain stable, enough to remain acceptable in a system that rewards performance more than presence. And over time, this distance stopped feeling like distance. It started feeling like identity. You stopped saying, something feels off. You started saying, this is just who I am. You started believing that this quiet absence inside you was your personality, your temperament, your nature, not realizing it was something you learned, something you adapted, something your nervous system built slowly, carefully, intelligently, to help you survive, not to help you disappear. But survival doesn't ask whether you feel connected. Survival asks whether you can continue. And you continued. You built a life. You fulfilled roles. You carried responsibilities. You became someone others could depend on. But dependency doesn't require presence. It requires consistency. And consistency is exactly what disconnection protects. Because disconnection allows you to keep moving, even when parts of you are no longer fully involved. Even when parts of you are waiting quietly in the background. Even when parts of you have not been felt in a very long time. This is why disconnection is so difficult to recognize. Because it doesn't break your life. It sustains it. It holds everything together. It allows everything to keep functioning. Until one day, you begin to notice the cost. Not suddenly. Subtly, you notice that you can't remember the last time you felt fully present without effort. You notice that you don't feel at home inside yourself the way you once did. You notice that something essential has been quiet for longer than you realized. And for the first time, you begin to question whether this distance was ever meant to be permanent. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something in you Remembers what it felt like before you learned to live this way. Remembers what it felt like before survival required you to slowly become someone who could exist without fully being there.